The sterile white walls of Grandview Medical Center felt impossibly vast to Sofia Kovac. Barely a month out of orientation, she felt more like a ghost than a nurse, moving through the bustling corridors, her quiet presence easily overlooked. Today, however, the usual hum had given way to a frantic symphony of dread. Inside Arterial, a name echoed that sent shivers through the entire hospital: Layla Abbas. The president's daughter, vibrant and full of life just hours ago, now lay teetering on the brink, her young life bleeding away, her father's raw despair palpable through the hushed doors. Dr. Kenzo Nakamura, chief of Cardiothoracic, usually an immovable titan of medicine, stood stiffly, his face a mask of baffled frustration. "It's unprecedented," he muttered, his voice devoid of its usual arrogant edge, glancing at the flickering monitors with a growing, cold despair. Sofia, tucked into a corner, tasked with fetching an obscure instrument, felt her stomach churn. She watched Layla, truly watched her, not the frantic numbers, but the subtle tremor in her hand, the faint, almost imperceptible discoloration beneath her eyes. A strange, sharp clarity cut through the chaos in Sofia's mind, a quiet knowing that stirred beneath her rookie anxieties. This wasn't just a dying girl, this was a puzzle only she, perhaps, could see. The air in Grandview's elite ICU was thick, not just with the sterile scent of antiseptic, but with a palpable tension that hummed like an overloaded circuit. It clung to the hushed conversations, the rhythmic beeps of monitors, and the strained expressions of the medical staff. This was Grandview, after all, a fortress of medical excellence where precision was paramount and hierarchy was absolute. But now, even its polished walls seemed to sweat with a desperate uncertainty. Dr. Kenzo Nakamura, a man whose reputation preceded him like a regal banner, paced with a restlessness that betrayed his usual unflappable exterior. His tailored scrubs and immaculately coiffed hair normally exuded an aura of untouchable competence. Now, his eyes, usually sharp and authoritative, darted between Layla Abbas's deteriorating vitals and the complex anatomical diagrams projected onto a wall screen. "Impossible," he muttered for the 10th time, running a hand over his brow. The sheer breadth of the dissection, the location, any conventional approach is a death sentence. His voice, though lowered, still carried the sharp edge of command, but underneath, Sofia heard the tremor of a man wrestling with a ghost of failure. Across the room, Dr. Indira Devi, head of neurology, was a stark contrast to Nakamura's agitated theatrics. Cool, intelligent, and formidable, she moved with an almost academic calm, her gaze fixed on the intricate angiograms. She spoke in precise, measured tones, her questions cutting to the core of the problem, her brilliance undeniable. "We've confirmed the acute arterial dissection, near the circle of Willis, extending towards the ascending aorta. Rapid internal bleeding, fluctuating cerebral perfusion. Every second, we lose viable tissue. The conventional surgical window, it simply doesn't exist, Kenzo. We'd rupture it just trying to get in." Her words, delivered with a detached clinicality, painted a terrifying picture of inevitability, a death sentence cloaked in medical jargon. Sofia, a rookie nurse barely a year out of training, felt the weight of their despair press down on her. She was supposed to be a ghost in these hallowed halls, assisting, observing, learning, but never truly interfering. Yet, as Layla's numbers flickered, as the faint, almost imperceptible discoloration beneath the president's daughter's eyes deepened, Sofia's mind began to race down a different path. She wasn't looking at the impressive 3D renders or the complex equations. She was looking at the patient. She saw the minute, almost imperceptible twitch in Layla's left hand, a symptom too subtle for the high-stakes, big-picture analysis of the specialists. She remembered a field hospital in a remote desert, a makeshift surgery under a tarp, and a similar tremor, a subtle shift in color that had meant everything. "Dr. Nakamura," Sofia began, her voice a reedy whisper, barely audible above the low hum of machines, "with respect, I've noticed a peculiar asymmetry in the left-sided pulse pressure, alongside a faint petechial rash just below the earlobe. Could that indicate a secondary, perhaps more superficial, access point, a less invasive path to the initial tear?" She hated how her voice trembled, how her hands clenched, but the words were out, an impulsive leap from observation to suggestion. Nakamura stopped pacing, turning slowly, his expression shifting from frustrated focus to icy irritation. He looked down at Sofia, his gaze dissecting her with a surgeon's precision, dismissing her with a single, contemptuous glance. "Nurse Kovac," he said, his voice laced with patronizing condescension, "your role is to administer medication and monitor vitals, not to speculate on surgical approaches that require decades of experience. Do you honestly believe you've stumbled upon something Dr. Devi and I, with our cumulative 50 years in this field, have overlooked?" He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that drew a ripple of nervous coughs from the surrounding residents. "This isn't a jumble clinic, Kovac. We operate with protocols, not hunches." The blood rushed to Sofia's face, a hot flush of humiliation. She wanted to shrink into the floor, to vanish. She mumbled an apology, her gaze falling to her worn sensible shoes. Dr. Devi, however, had paused her review of the scans. Her eyes, cool and analytical, darted from Nakamura's dismissive face to Sofia's downcast one, then briefly, almost imperceptibly, back to the monitors, her mind cataloging the seemingly irrelevant data Sofia had mentioned. She said nothing, but a flicker of something unreadable crossed her features before she returned to her work. Layla's vitals dipped again, a sharp, alarming drop that stole the air from the room. A nurse gasped. Nakamura spun back to the monitors, his earlier irritation swallowed by a fresh wave of panic. "Give me the latest COAC panel. Devi, any thoughts on mitigating the cerebral ischemia? We're losing her." Sofia, still stinging from the public dressing down, felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. They were losing Layla, and what she had seen, what her instincts screamed, was being ignored. The memory of the field clinic, of improvising, of saving lives when protocols simply didn't exist, burned brighter now. The girl was dying, and the elite doctors, for all their brilliance, were paralyzed by fear and the rigid framework of Grandview. Sofia clenched her fists, a quiet, desperate resolve beginning to solidify beneath her humiliation. She had seen this pattern before, this desperate dance with death, and she knew, with a certainty that transcended her rookie status, that there was another way. The question was, would anyone dare to listen before it was too late? The hushed tension in the trauma bay had curdled into something acrid and suffocating. Layla Abbas's condition, despite the frantic efforts of the elite team, was not improving. If anything, the subtle, insidious creep of her deterioration was becoming more pronounced. The monitors sang a discordant symphony of a body fighting a losing battle. Her blood pressure, a fleeting moment ago somewhat stable, began to dip again, a slow, inevitable slide towards collapse. The rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator seemed to strain, her chest rising and falling with an unnatural effort. Nakamura, his brow furrowed in a mask of intense concentration, barked orders. "Increase the pressors. Push another unit of blood, stat. We need to stabilize that cerebral perfusion." He was operating on instinct, pulling from the vast arsenal of standard protocols for acute vascular emergencies. The plan was textbook: flood the system, boost pressure, maintain organ function. It was the correct response for almost any other catastrophic internal bleed, but not for Layla's unique, delicate dissection. His reputation, his entire career, hinged on saving the president's daughter, and he would exhaust every conventional avenue, every proven method, before admitting defeat. Sofia watched, a knot of icy dread tightening in her gut. Her eyes, trained in the chaos of field medicine to spot anomalies others missed, darted between Layla's face, the monitor's frantic dance, and the focused faces of the doctors. She saw it then, a minute, almost imperceptible twitch in Layla's left hand, followed by a slight, asymmetrical dilation in her right pupil. Microembolic shower, her mind screamed. And then, as the pressors surged into Layla's veins, the telltale flicker on the EKG, a subtle, but definite, increase in the irregular beats. The blood pressure rose, yes, but the internal bleeding was accelerating with the increased pressure, forcing the already compromised vessel to strain further, shedding more debris. "Dr. Nakamura," Sofia began, her voice barely a whisper above the whirring machines, "the pupil and the ectopics are actually increasing with the pressors. Could the elevated pressure be exacerbating the dissection, not stabilizing it?" Nakamura didn't even turn. "Nurse Kovac, focus on maintaining the airway." We're working a systemic collapse, not a neuro event. This is basic hemodynamics. His voice was sharp, dismissive. He gestured imperiously to a resident. Run another neuro check in 5 minutes. Let's see if we can get her volume up. Dr. Devi, observing from a few feet away, caught Sofia's gaze. A flicker of intrigue crossed her intelligent features, but she quickly refocused on Nakamura, trusting his immediate expertise. Kenzo, what are the chances of converting to ECMO if we can't get her stable in the next 10? Before Nakamura could reply, a chilling screech tore through the quiet hum of the machines. The EKG monitor, which had been erratic, now displayed a terrifying, flat line, asystole. Layla's body convulsed once, a final, desperate gasp, then went utterly limp. The monitors shrieked in unison, a chorus of alarm. "She's flatlining," someone yelled, the voice cracking with sheer terror. The room erupted into controlled chaos, now spiraling out of control. Nakamura spun, his face a mask of horrified disbelief, arrogance evaporating into naked fear. "Charge the paddles. 1 milligram AP, push now. Give me a crash cart, now." The air was thick with the metallic tang of fear and adrenaline. Desperation clawed at everyone. President Abbas's daughter was dying, was dead, and their every move had only hastened the inevitable. The human stakes had never been higher, the collective dread more palpable. Sofia stood frozen for a split second, the image of Layla's still face seared into her mind. The humiliation of being dismissed, the cold logic of her diagnostic intuition, and the raw, undeniable sight of a young life slipping away before her eyes, coalesced into a fierce, unyielding resolve. They were failing. All of them. And she knew why. She had to break through. She would break through. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a burning, primal urge to save a life, to act on the hidden knowledge that screamed inside her. She took a deep breath, preparing to do the unthinkable, to challenge the gods of Grandview Medical Center, to offer a radical solution where protocol had failed, and where a young woman's life hung by the most fragile of threads. Haven't we all felt like Sofia, with a crucial insight, yet struggling to be seen or heard? That universal feeling of being overlooked, only to rise when it matters most, is at the heart of why we tell these tales. If Sofia's courage resonates with you, and you love stories where the underdog triumphs, we'd be so honored if you'd consider subscribing. Join our vibrant global community of enthusiasts. Your invaluable support helps us create and share even more captivating, high-quality narratives like Sofia's. Let's embark on these incredible journeys together. It's truly special to have you with us. The ore erupted into a maelstrom of controlled chaos. Layla Abbas, her skin an alarming gray, was wheeled in with a speed that defied the usual stately pace of Grandview. The previous quiet desperation had been replaced by a frantic energy, a last, desperate gamble against an encroaching certainty. President Abbas's raw cry still echoed in the silent corners of Sofia's mind, a mournful counterpoint to the relentless beeping of the monitor that now screamed a flatline. Then, after a heroic push of drugs, a faint, erratic pulse, a ghost clinging to life. Nakamura, his face a mask of furious concentration, stood poised, scalpel in hand, but his movements were hesitant. The weight of his reputation, the critical eyes of his peers, and the stark reality of the dying girl before him, all conspired to paralyze him. This was the moment of truth, and for the first time in his illustrious career, he didn't know where to begin. Standard protocols were death sentences. Sofia, however, moved with an almost ethereal calm. The fear that had gnawed at her moments ago was still a cold ember, but it was now entirely overshadowed by a burning clarity, a fierce resolve that straightened her spine and sharpened her gaze. This wasn't about her anymore, it was about Layla. She stepped forward, past the usual surgical nurses, positioning herself not as an assistant, but as the orchestrator. Dr. Nakamura, her voice cut through the tension, clear and surprisingly steady, "We need a different access point. Superior vena cava, not inferior. Higher angle of entry, lateral, just below the second rib. Millimeter precision, doctor. No margin for error." Nakamura's head snapped up, his eyes burning with outrage. Nurse Kovac. This is my oar. Do you have any idea what you're suggesting? That's entirely unconventional, a deviation from every established procedure for this type of repair. The risks are astronomical. His voice, though strained, still carried the sharp edge of command, accustomed to immediate obedience. The risks of not doing it are absolute, Dr. Nakamura, Sofia retorted, her gaze unwavering, meeting his furious glare head-on. The dissection is too volatile, too deep for conventional access without catastrophic tearing. The SVC approach, carefully angled, gives us a cleaner, more stable path to the repair site. I've seen it done, albeit in less sterile conditions. The last part she mumbled, a flicker of her past, of makeshift tents and desperate measures, flashing in her eyes. Dr. Devi, who had silently followed them into the OR, stepped closer, her keen intellect processing Sofia's words. She looked from Sofia's determined face to Nakamura's bewildered one. Kenzo, she said, her tone quiet but firm, her logic is compelling. And we are out of options. Layla's vitals are still deteriorating. Nakamura hesitated, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle twitched in his cheek. His career, his reputation, his very identity as a world-renowned surgeon was built on following established, proven methods. To deviate now, to take direction from a rookie nurse, felt like a public humiliation, a surrender of his authority. Yet, the steady, rhythmic beeping that signified Layla's fading life was a relentless drumbeat, pushing him towards the unthinkable. He looked at Sofia, at the quiet strength in her eyes, at the way her hands, usually gloved in latex, seemed to pulse with a knowing energy. He saw not a timid rookie, but a person absolutely certain in the face of absolute uncertainty. All right, he bit out, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Show me. But if this goes wrong, Kovac, it's on you. The blame, he knew, would fall on him regardless, but the statement was his last defiant roar against the crumbling walls of his professional ego. Sofia ignored the barb, her focus already absolute. Scalpel, she instructed, her voice calm, devoid of triumph or fear. Entry point, Dr. Nakamura, approximately 2 centimeters below the clavicular notch, just lateral to the sternal border. Angle 25 degrees medially, then slowly, carefully, a slight downward trajectory. The tissue here will be more pliable. You'll feel a subtle shift in resistance as you near the vessel wall. Nakamura, his hands usually so confident, felt a tremor. This was a dance on the edge of a razor. He made the initial incision, his eyes now glued to Sofia's, searching for her silent cues. She didn't touch him, didn't interfere physically, but her gaze, her slight nods, the almost imperceptible tensing of her shoulders, became his compass. He plunged the scalpel, following her precise verbal directions, his initial resentment giving way to a grudging fascination, then a dawning awe. This wasn't guesswork, it was a profound, intuitive understanding of the human anatomy, seen through a lens he'd never encountered. Each millimeter of progression was excruciating, a silent conversation between Sofia's hidden knowledge and Nakamura's unparalleled surgical skill. The oar was silent save for the whirring of machines and Sofia's quiet, steady directives. The transformation was palpable. Sofia, no longer the overlooked rookie, was commanding the room, her inner strength radiating outward. And Nakamura, the arrogant chief surgeon, was, for the first time in perhaps his entire career, truly listening. He was placing his trust, and Layla's life, into the hands of a nurse he had dismissed just moments ago, drawn forward by the sheer, undeniable force of her expertise. The non-standard access was made, a precise, perfect opening into a vessel that would lead them to a seemingly impossible repair. The critical phase had truly begun. The non-standard access was made, a precise, perfect opening into a vessel that would lead them to a seemingly impossible repair. The air in the operating theater, already thick with unspoken anxieties, seemed to solidify further. Now, with the delicate entry established, Sofia's role shifted from navigator to conductor of an orchestra where every note was a matter of life or death. Microsuture, .04, Sofia's voice was a steady murmur, cutting through the humming of machines. Her gaze remained locked on the magnified screen, her eyes tracing lines and shadows invisible to even the most seasoned surgeons. Nakamura, distal to the tear. Angle of approach, 315 degrees. Pressure, light, sustained. Nakamura, his brow furrowed in concentration, meticulously followed her direction. His hands, usually so decisive and autonomous, now moved with an almost ethereal deference, guided by the quiet directives of the rookie nurse beside him. The initial resentment had given way to a profound, unsettling awe. He was performing the most complex surgery of his career, guided not by years of rigorous training, but by an instinct born from a battlefield. It was an intellectual affront, yet his surgeon's mind, ever pragmatic, recognized the undeniable truth unfolding before him. She was seeing something he couldn't. On the vitals monitor, Layla Abbas's heart rate, though still fast, held a precarious rhythm. Her blood pressure, once plummeting, had momentarily stabilized in an unnervingly narrow window. Every soft beat from the machine was a collective breath held, a fragile testament to the success of Sofia's unconventional approach so far. Dr. Devi leaned closer, her intelligent eyes flitting between Sofia's focused profile and the intricate work on screen. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. This wasn't just medical procedure, it was a performance of pure, untamed intuition. Sofia wasn't just directing, she was anticipating, correcting, navigating microcurrents within Layla's arterial system that no textbook could adequately prepare for. Devi could almost feel the energy radiating from Sofia, a calm, unwavering force that commanded not through volume, but through sheer, unadulterated competence. The other surgical residents and nurses in the room were frozen, their initial skepticism replaced by open-mouthed astonishment. They had witnessed the chief of cardiothoracic surgery, a man synonymous with unyielding authority, take orders from a nurse. And not just take orders, but execute them with a newfound humility and precision that spoke volumes of his growing trust. The hierarchy of Grandview Medical Center was dissolving, piece by painful piece, under the weight of a dying girl and the unlikely brilliance of Sofia Kovac. Suture complete. Now, a microclip. Placement is critical, Nakamura. We're bridging a gap no larger than a pinprick, but it's the lifeline to her cerebral perfusion, Sofia instructed, her voice steady, utterly devoid of panic, even as a soft, rhythmic thump-thump from the monitor indicated Layla's heart was under increasing strain. Nakamura's hands, guided by Sofia's voice, moved with a grace born of decades of practice, yet imbued with a new, almost spiritual focus. He felt the weight of Sofia's conviction, her absolute certainty in every single instruction. He placed a minuscule clip. A wave of relief swept through the room, brief but palpable. For a few precious seconds, Layla's vitals seemed to hold. The lines on the monitor steadied, the pressure climbed marginally. Hope, a fragile, desperate thing, flickered. Then, the monitor screamed. A sharp, piercing tone ripped through the tense silence, jolting every person in the room. Layla's blood pressure plummeted, a red, angry line collapsing on the screen. Her heart rate surged erratically, then began to flatline. "She's crashing," a resident gasped, the sound a raw whisper of terror. Nakamura's head snapped up, his face etched with sudden horror. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice cracking with renewed panic. His eyes darted to Sofia, searching for answers, for any explanation to this sudden, catastrophic turn. Sofia, however, remained unnervingly still, her gaze fixed on the screen, her mind already racing. There was no fear in her eyes, only intense, rapid calculation. The subtle flicker of muscle around her jaw was the only sign of the immense pressure she was under. A micro-rupture, distal to the clip. Not the dissection, but a secondary, pressure-induced tear, Sofia stated, her voice calm, clear, almost scientific, even as Layla's life ebbed away before them. "It's small, but it's bleeding internally, rapidly. We've got seconds." The monitors blared again, louder this time, a final, deafening alarm. The blare of the monitors, a final, deafening alarm, was a sound designed to shatter courage, to announce defeat. But for Sofia, it was a call to action. Her gaze remained unflinching, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities, her body coiled with an unfamiliar calm. The air crackled with a primal fear, the stark, cold terror of watching a life extinguish. But Sofia wasn't watching Layla die, she was watching how to save her. It's a microrupture, distal to the clip. Not the dissection, but a secondary, pressure-induced tear, Sofia stated, her voice calm, clear, almost scientific, even as Layla's life ebbed away before them. It's small, but it's bleeding internally, rapidly. We've got seconds. The collective gasp in the room was sharp, visceral. Seconds? No one moved, paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of the situation. Nakamura stared, a cold sweat beading on his forehead, his own surgical prowess rendered impotent by the unforgiving nature of the crisis. "Get me the microsuture kit, smallest gauge," Sofia commanded, her eyes never leaving the monitor. Her voice, while steady, carried an unshakable authority that cut through the haze of panic. "And Nakamura, your hand. I need you to thread through the existing access. There's no time for another entry. We have to pinch off the leak point. It's too small to see directly, but I can guide you." Nakamura blinked, disbelief warring with a desperate sliver of hope. Thread through an existing access, blind? It was unheard of, reckless. His reputation, his career, flashed before his eyes. But then he looked at Layla, her vitals a frantic, dying dance on the screen, and he looked at Sofia's eyes, resolute, unwavering, radiating a fierce conviction that he couldn't deny. This wasn't bravado, it was certainty. "How?" he rasped, his own voice sounding alien. "Feel," Sofia instructed, her tone softening slightly, a mentor guiding a student through an intricate procedure. "The tissue will have a different give, a slight resistance around the tear. It's like feeling a ripple in still water. Gently, gently, follow my lead. I'll tell you when you're there. Now." The command was absolute. Nakamura swallowed hard, gripping the microforceps. With a deep, shuddering breath, he plunged back into the unknown, guided by Sofia's voice, her eyes fixed on the telemetry, seeing what no one else could. "Slightly to the left, millimeter by millimeter, feel for the change, yes. There. You have it." Sofia's voice was a lifeline, clear and precise. "Now, hold steady. Prepare to deploy the microsuture. It's barely larger than a hair. One stitch, Nakamura. One perfect stitch, and it holds." The tension in the room was a physical entity, pressing down on everyone, stealing their breath. Every eye was on Nakamura's hands, trembling ever so slightly, and on Sofia's face, etched with a superhuman focus. The only sound was the frantic beeping of the monitor, each beep a hammer blow against their hope. Then, a sudden, almost imperceptible shift. Nakamura's brow furrowed in intense concentration, his fingers moving with an almost balletic grace. There was a faint click, barely audible. He had done it. "Hold!" Sofia barked, her voice suddenly tight with raw emotion. "Don't move a muscle." They all watched. For an agonizing second, nothing changed. The monitors still screamed. Then, slowly, miraculously, the erratic spikes began to calm. The blood pressure, which had been plummeting, began to creep back up. The heart rate, once a frantic drumbeat of death, found a steady, rhythmic cadence. The blaring alarm, once deafening, softened. The frantic red lines on the screen softened into stable green waves. Layla's vitals weren't just stabilizing, they were returning to normal. A collective, shuddering gasp rippled through the room. It wasn't a cry of joy, not yet, but a sound of profound, visceral relief. Shoulders slumped. Tears, unshed moments before, began to trickle down faces. Dr. Chen, the usually stoic resident, buried her face in her hands, sobbing silently. Nakamura slowly, carefully withdrew the instruments. His hands, which had been so precise, now trembled uncontrollably. He looked at the monitor, then at his hands, then at Sofia. His face was a mask of disbelief, awe, and an exhaustion so deep it felt like his bones might ache for a week. Sofia, too, felt the adrenaline drain away, leaving her utterly spent. A faint tremor ran through her, a delayed reaction to the immense pressure she had just endured. Her gaze, however, remained fixed on the now steady green lines. She had done it. They had done it. Dr. Devi, who had watched the entire impossible dance unfold, stepped forward, a soft, knowing smile gracing her lips. She simply nodded at Sofia, her eyes conveying a world of understanding and burgeoning respect. Nakamura, his voice raspy with emotion, finally broke the silence. He looked at Sofia, not as a rookie nurse, but as a peer, a savior. His arrogance had dissolved into the sterile air of the OR, replaced by something profound and humbling. She's stable, he breathed, the words barely audible, yet ringing with the weight of an entire universe saved. He looked around at the stunned faces of his team, then back at Sofia. Completely stable. You saved her, nurse. His voice cracked, the raw emotion undeniable. You actually saved her. Relief washed over the room like a tidal wave, breaking down the professional walls, revealing the raw, vulnerable humanity beneath. Layla Abbas was alive. And it was all thanks to the quiet, overlooked nurse whose unique vision had pierced through the darkest hour. The silence that followed wasn't merely the absence of sound, it was the echo of triumph, the catharsis of a life snatched back from the brink, against all odds. The sterile silence of the operating room shattered, not with a bang, but with the collective, shaky exhales of the surgical team. Dr. Nakamura's words, "You actually saved her," hung in the air, a profound admission of defeat for his ego and a monumental victory for Sofia. He stepped back from the table, his shoulders slumping, not in exhaustion, but in the weight of a dawning realization. He looked at Sofia, a new, raw respect etched onto his usually imperious features. The fear of failure, the pressure of protocol, the rigid hierarchy, all of it had crumbled under the sheer, undeniable force of Sofia's quiet competence. Dr. Devi, who had watched Sofia with increasing awe throughout the procedure, was the first to move. She walked over to Sofia, her eyes, usually sharp and analytical, now softened with admiration. She didn't speak immediately, simply placing a hand on Sofia's arm, a gesture of profound respect. "Sofia," she began, her voice steady but laced with emotion, "what you did in there, it was extraordinary. Beyond anything I've witnessed in my career." She turned to the stunned residents and nurses, her gaze sweeping over them. Dr. Nakamura made the execution possible, but Nurse Kovac saw what no one else could. She identified the impossible, then mapped the impossible solution. That, my friends, is genius. Nakamura, usually bristling at any perceived challenge to his authority, simply nodded, his gaze still fixed on Sofia. "Devi is right," he said, his voice clearer now, though still hoarse. He cleared his throat. I doubted you, Nurse Kovac. I dismissed you. And I was catastrophically wrong. Your ability to see beyond the obvious, your precision under pressure, it saved President Abbas's daughter. It saved Layla." The name, spoken with such tender care, was another testament to the shattering of his professional facade. He extended a hand to Sofia, a gesture of genuine, heartfelt acknowledgement. "Thank you, Sofia. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." Sofia, still calm, still humble, met his gaze and gently shook his hand. A faint smile touched her lips, a glimmer of profound relief and quiet satisfaction, not of triumph. "We saved her, Dr. Nakamura," she corrected softly, her voice steady. "We all did." Her eyes flickered to Dr. Devi, then to the exhausted faces of the scrub nurses and anesthesiologists. Everyone played their part. Just then, the doors to the OR burst open, and President Abbas, looking utterly ravaged but clinging to a fragile hope, rushed in, flanked by grim-faced security. His eyes immediately went to Layla, then to the team gathered around her. "Is she?" he started, his voice thick with unshed tears. Dr. Devi stepped forward, a reassuring smile gracing her lips. "Mr. President," she said, "Layla is stable." The procedure was a success. The president's knees buckled slightly, and a relieved sob escaped him. He moved to his daughter's side, placing a trembling hand on her forehead. Then, his eyes, still clouded with residual fear, found Dr. Nakamura. "Dr. Nakamura," he began, I can't thank you enough. You saved my daughter." Nakamura, to the astonishment of everyone, gently redirected the president's attention. "Mr. President," he said, stepping aside and gesturing toward Sofia. "While I executed the procedure, the true genius, the vision that saved Layla, belongs to Nurse Sofia Kovac." The president's gaze shifted to Sofia. He looked at her, a quiet, unassuming figure in her scrubs, and a flicker of confusion crossed his face. He remembered the young nurse who had been assigned to Layla, but he hadn't fully registered her. Now, seeing the profound respect in the eyes of his chief surgeon and urologist, he understood. He walked slowly toward Sofia, his posture rigid with the weight of his office, yet his eyes brimming with a father's overwhelming gratitude. "Nurse Kovac," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. He took her hands in his grip firm. "Dr. Nakamura and Dr. Devi tell me, you did the impossible. You saw what no one else could. How did you know?" His question was filled with wonder, not skepticism. Sofia hesitated for a moment, her gaze sweeping over the grateful faces. It was a moment of truth, a chance to explain not just a skill, but the very essence of who she was. "Mr. President," she began, her voice soft but clear, "before I came to Grandview, I worked in less conventional settings. War zones, remote clinics, places where resources were scarce and improvising was the only option. You learn to read the most subtle cues, to trust your instincts, and to find solutions when standard protocols simply don't exist." Her eyes held a flicker of distant memories, dusty fields, makeshift operating tables, the desperate faces of people with nowhere else to turn. It wasn't just medical training, it was about seeing the human beneath the illness, and understanding that sometimes the greatest strength lies in adapting and finding the path no one else dares to take. Her words were met with a profound silence. It wasn't just a revelation of qualifications, but a window into Sofia's soul. Her journey wasn't merely a career path, it was a testament to resilience, compassion, and an unyielding dedication to life. The quiet rookie nurse, once overlooked, stood before them not as a hero in a dramatic sense, but as a beacon of quiet, unwavering competence forged in the crucible of real-world suffering. The hierarchy of Grandview Medical Center, once so rigid, now seemed to bend and reshape around the quiet strength of Sofia Kovac. She was no longer just a nurse, she was a clinician, a visionary, a testament to the fact that true genius often hid in plain sight, waiting for the moment to prove its worth. The weight of Sofia's quiet confession settled over the room, not as a shock, but as a profound realization. Her past wasn't just a backstory, it was the bedrock of her genius, explaining every precise intuition, every calm command in the OR. The transformation wasn't just hers, it was happening to Grandview Medical Center itself. Layla Abbas, meanwhile, was slowly but steadily recovering. Her vitals remained stable, her neurological functions intact. The relief that washed over the Abbas family, and the nation, was palpable. President Abbas, often finding Sofia quietly checking monitors, saw in her not just a gifted clinician, but a protector. His public statements now included heartfelt tributes to the medical team, and implicitly, to the nurse who had saved his daughter. The ripple effect within Grandview was immediate and profound. The hospital administration, spurred by Dr. Devi's advocacy and the president's backing, began to reevaluate its approach to talent and protocol. The rigid hierarchy showed its first genuine cracks. Task forces formed to learn, not reprimand. There was talk of integrating diverse skill sets and establishing pathways for unconventional expertise. Sofia Kovac's experience became a case study. How had such a brilliant mind almost been overlooked, stifled by conventional expectations? Dr. Nakamura, the once arrogant chief cardiothoracic, found himself on a different path. The public acknowledgement of Sofia's pivotal role had been a painful but necessary dose of humility. He still carried the weight of his reputation, but now tempered by profound respect. He began actively seeking her input, not just on critical cases, but in departmental meetings. He even started mentoring younger doctors differently, encouraging them to look beyond textbook answers, to listen, and to question assumptions. His colleagues noticed a change, a slight softening, a new openness. He hadn't lost his brilliance, but had gained something far more valuable, wisdom and true leadership, built on collaboration. Dr. Devi, true to her intellectual honesty, became Sofia's fiercest champion. She facilitated Sofia's transition into a newly created role, a clinical consultant for critical care, designed to leverage her diagnostic intuition and procedural guidance across departments. It wasn't about titles for Sofia, it was about the freedom to practice her unique brand of medicine, to bring her full self to every challenge. Devi saw her as the future of medicine, a bridge between rigorous science and intuitive art. For Sofia, the transformation was perhaps the most deeply felt. The invisibility she had once navigated became a distant memory. Colleagues greeted her with respect, often with a subtle nod. Her days were no longer spent just assisting, she was consulting, teaching, and leading discussions. Yet, she remained intrinsically Sofia, humble, grounded, and deeply compassionate. Prestige didn't change her essence, it merely allowed her to amplify her authentic self. She chose to continue wearing her nurse's scrubs, a quiet testament to her roots and a reminder that true healing transcended titles. Her authentic life wasn't about escaping her past, but integrating it, allowing her experiences in the most challenging corners of the world to inform her work in the most advanced. The weight of saving Layla Abbas had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose renewed. She found solace and strength in connecting with other nurses, advocating for their voices, sharing her philosophy that every person on the medical team held invaluable insights. Her journey was a testament that expertise wasn't always found in grand degrees or impressive titles, but often in the quiet resilience, the unyielding empathy, and the diverse experiences of individuals. Grandview Medical Center, once a symbol of rigid hierarchy, was slowly evolving. It was a subtle, human-driven revolution, sparked by one quiet nurse who dared to speak up, and by those who dared to listen. It was a story not just of a life saved, but of a system beginning to save itself, embracing humanity and recognizing that true progress came from valuing every unique perspective. Sofia Kovac, once just a name on a staff roster, had become a living embodiment of hope, a reminder that the greatest changes often begin with the smallest, most courageous voices. Her journey was far from over, it was just beginning, now on her own terms, open and ready for whatever new challenges and lives awaited her. Sofia's incredible journey reminds us that true impact often comes from the quietest voices and the most unique experiences. It's a profound testament to the power of courage, empathy, and challenging the status quo for the greater good. What quiet moments of bravery have you witnessed or experienced that changed everything? We hope Sofia's story resonated deeply with you. If it did, please consider subscribing to join our growing global community. Your invaluable support helps us create more powerful and inspiring narratives like this one. Thank you warmly for watching and for being an essential part of our journey together.